Today on No Greater Love with Pastor Jeff Kramer.
And that is this, is that growth in the Christian faith, it happens as we follow Jesus with steps of faith. And we know that is certain because Hebrews 11:6 tells us that for without faith, we cannot please God. In other words, we only grow as we take steps of faith. And if I could take the language and maybe make it so that it's personal, I would tell you that many times it's risky following the Lord. Risky. So if we're talking about faith, for sure, but we're realizing that practically speaking, as we're seeing the examples here in Genesis, in the book of Ruth, characters, people, real life people, that there's risk in walking out the life of faith. Because what if God doesn't uphold his promise? What if God doesn't do what he said he's going to do? And yet at the same time, is there really any risk in following the Lord and trusting the Lord? No, there's not, because nothing is too hard from him. And his character is certain and true. And if he said it, he's going to do it. He's going to take care of it.
Through innocent blood, he showed his love, taking the cross for us. No greater love than innocent blood.
Welcome to No Greater Love with Pastor Jeff Kramer. Have you ever had to face the choice of remaining in the promises God's given or trying to play it safe by seeking relief apart from faith? This type of scenario is repeated throughout the Bible in our everyday lives as Christians. Today we're back in Genesis 26, where we focus on Isaac as we see his faith over an extended period of time. He falls back into the same difficult decisions and lapses of faith that his father Abraham had modeled for him. The funny thing about trials is that they either draw us closer to God or move us further away, depending on our response. And now, let's join Pastor Jeff in a message titled, Repeating the Past.
In today's Bible study here, what we're going to do is we're going to focus on the second one. You know, there's this little parenthetical here, chapter 26, that gives us a little bit more details here regarding Isaac and everything that was going on in him. And what we're going to see is we're going to see this picture, a little expanse of his life, and we're just going to do the best we can to look at it here. And so I did number one is this, following by faith. First 5 verses, they tell us this. It says that there was a famine in the land besides the first famine. And that was in the days of Abraham and Isaac. He went to Abimelech, king of the Philistines, in Gerar. Now, let's just stop right there for just a second. We're going to throw up on the screen here a particular map. It's important to you because you're watching this stuff and you're hearing about this stuff right now. Might as well take a look at it. Now, forgive the map. The map is stretched, but maybe you'll find the picture here. Okay, we got the Mediterranean Sea over here on the left-hand side. Some of you have been to Israel with me. There's the Dead Sea right there. You can't miss it right there. We got Egypt. Oh, look at that. There's a little arrow down to Egypt right there, right? This is Canaan across this area. Big picture Canaan. Philistines inhabit that coastal area. That's it. They're a seafaring people along the coast. That's the Philistines. Oh, maybe you might recognize the name Palestine. Okay? That's it, right here. This is what you're looking at. Now, as you see, well, what did we just read here? It said that he went to the land of Philistines, verse number 1, in Gerar. Can you find Gerar right here? All right, this is just right next to the left up here. Guess what that is? Gaza Strip. That's it. That's the whole deal. So back in the text here, again, Genesis 26, verse number 1. Okay, we can understand here that what happened with Isaac is that he went to the land of Gerar. It says, in verse 2, it says that the Lord appeared to him and said, "Do not go down to Egypt, and live in the land of which I shall tell you. Dwell in this land, and I will be with you and bless you. For to you and your descendants I give all these lands, and I will perform the oath which I swore to Abraham your father, and I will make your descendants multiply as the stars of heaven. I will give to your descendants all these lands." So whose land is this? This is God's land to be given away. And as we're here in the very beginning, the promise came to Abraham being passed down through his sons, because what we're looking at is the program of God regarding the land, the chosen land of what he promised. And whether it be Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph, they did not get the full inheritance of that. The conquest came through Joshua. And even in the conquest of Joshua, of taking this allotted territory, Canaan, which Philistines would be again, those are on the coastal there of the Mediterranean. But watching the news, you see Gaza, you see Ascalon, which is in Israel proper right now today. Same thing with Ashdod. You see that little space of land right there that is still highly contested as of right now. But it really, in technicality, it's all God's, and he gave it to what we call Israel, the Hebrew people, the Jewish people, and all that stuff. And even though that they have passed and taken and all that stuff, rightfully, according to the promise coming back into Genesis, it is the people of God. It is the Jewish people. And so I just want you to understand that. And so what happened with all of this? Well, we find in this story here, following by faith, that in verse number one, it references the famine in the time of Abraham. And what happened with Abraham? Well, Genesis 12, verse 10 down through 13, I'm not going to go there. You can just reference it. That this is Isaac's father. And we know that Abraham, that he faced a trial of faith. It was a severe famine that took place in the land. And rather than remain in the promise of God in this promised land, well, Abraham, he waffled a little bit. And the circumstances moved him to a place to where he didn't stand on the promises of God. He moved into an area because he just didn't see the evidence. He wasn't connecting the dots, if you will. And he moved out of the area down into Egypt where God did not want him to go. He was to remain in the promised land. And this type of story of when trials come into our life, listen, this is repeated all through the scriptures, Old Testament, New Testament, your life, my life. The trials come. There's promises that we have in God. And man, somehow we forget the promises of God, and then we waffle in the practicalities of our faith. And let me give you a couple examples. I'm going to give two examples because I love both of these examples. First one is in the book of Ruth chapter 1. We got Elimelech and we got Naomi. You remember that at that time they're living in Bethlehem, and this is just south of Jerusalem, and a famine rolled through at that time. And what did they do? They left the house of bread, Bethlehem, and they went down to Moab, which is God's wash pot. And in Moab at that moment where Bethlehem was experiencing the famine, in Moab, well, there wasn't a famine. The things were well. And so they wanted to play it safe because, this is our life, and, we're married, and we got kids, and all of this stuff. And so going down to Moab was a representation of them playing it safe. They sought relief on their own abilities, distant or separate from the will of God. God did not want his people to relocate to Moab, because changing countries specifically for a Jewish person to leave Jerusalem, Bethlehem, some of the tribal areas across there, and go to a pagan country, basically, it was like, dude, you straight up just backslid, and you're just denying the faith. That was the tonality that came from it, whether they said anything or not. And so, in the end, what happened with those two, Elimelech and Naomi? That's what the book of Ruth is all about. Well, in the end, it was a devastating decision that husband and wife combination made there, but it took a decade for the ramifications of it to come to full fruition. You remember that that the husband died, that the two sons died, and all of that stuff. And Naomi was faced and left. She made her way back up into Bethlehem, with one of her daughter-in-laws and all of that stuff. But it took a while for that to all come out. That was an example of a situation being so stressed, and opposed to remaining in the care, in the promise, in the place where God said that I'm going to take care of you right here. They waffled and they took off. Abraham did that. Now, there's more in this that we should understand. And that is this, is that growth in the Christian faith, it happens as we follow Jesus with steps of faith. And we know that is certain because Hebrews 11:6 tells us that for without faith, we cannot please God. In other words, we only grow as we take steps of faith, And if I could take the language and maybe make it so that it's personal, I would tell you that many times it's risky following the Lord. Risky. So if we're talking about faith, for sure, but we're realizing that practically speaking, as we're seeing the examples here in Genesis, in the book of Ruth, characters, people, real life people, that there's risk in walking out the life of faith. Because what if God doesn't uphold his promise? What if God doesn't do what he said he's going to do? And yet, at the same time, is there really any risk in following the Lord and trusting the Lord? No, there's not, because nothing is too hard from him. And his character is certain and true. And if he said it, he's going to do it. He's going to take care of it. And there are many times where we just don't understand what God is doing. And there are also times that God allows us to go into places of suffering so that we would learn the lessons, so that we would grow in character, so that we would realize that the kingdom of God is not eating and drinking and all of that stuff. You know, all of the pleasure components that we get if we want to live a reckless life here by partying and hanging out and having no real responsibilities. No. God has something more than that. And there are times when God calls us to do something that rages against all natural logic. No, well, that can't be true, Jeff. Well, are you sure? Have you considered Gideon in Judges chapter 6 and 7? Because what happened here with Gideon, it's, you don't have to follow along, but it is just to your right there. It's right at the front of your Bible. But in Gideon, or in Judges with Gideon, I should say, that God called him to do something absolutely crazy. He says, go and tear down that altar of Baal. Let me interpret that for you. He was tearing down the city's statue here and even stuff that his dad had, and that meant that he was taking his own life into his hands. Imagine dropping into Gaza, you as an American, before the war that happened, and going into the city square and just desecrating something there. Would it go well for you? Probably not. You may not leave the same way that you entered, okay? Now you understand. You get it. You get where Gideon and what he was doing. And God called him to tear down the altar of Baal. And then God called him right there, and right in that thread of just looking through chapter 6, chapter 7, okay, that God called him to take on 135,000 Midianites. Judges chapter 8, verse 10, you'll see the number, the calculation of the number there. And oh yeah, while initially it looked pretty cool because he had 10s and 20s and maybe just over 30,000 people at first. Oh, this is great. But God says, tell them, hey, if there's anybody that is here and afraid and scared, go home. And 22,000, they bolted out on him. And then he's got a remainder of 10,000. Well, okay, 10,000. Well, we're the super elite. We're IDF. We're going to get this done, Nope. God says you still got too many because in your own pride, you're going to think that it was you and how great you were. Take them down to the brook. And some of you haven't, actually, I would say most of you that has gone on the Israel trip, I've never taken you to this spot, although it's right in the way that we go. Hey, you have to go again. I'll have to show it to you here. All right? And he takes 10,000 and he pares it down to 300 committed dudes. And this is spectacular. This is amazing. The AR-15s that they're given and the fighter jets that they're given, right? Because we got 300 guys taking on 135,000 people. What they're given is amazing. Oh, it's spectacular. Let me read it to you. You could look in Judges 7 and 16. They are given trumpets, pitchers, and torches. That's their weapons. Woo! Following God is not always reasonable, okay? We can understand that from the Old Testament to the New Testament. But here's what we're to learn. You'll see this on the screen here. This is the lesson here. That God calls the man, God strengthens the man, and God fights for the man. In Judges chapter 7, verse 21 and 22, it would tell us this. It says that every man stood in his place all around the camp. This is the camp of the Midianites. And the whole army ran, and they cried out, and they fled. And when the 300 blew the trumpets, the Lord set every man's sword, this is the Midianites, he set every man's sword against his companion throughout the whole camp. And the army fled to Beth Acacia towards Zerah, as far as the border of Abel, and he kind of tells us a thing. The whole idea is just nothing more than understanding this, is that sometimes God calls us to do some crazy things. And now we're back in our text here of Genesis 26, and we're seeing the son of Abraham. This is Isaac, and the years that have passed and all of that stuff. And we come to our second idea of the night, and that is a lapse of faith. Verses 6 all the way down through 16, we we find, it says that so Isaac, he dwelt in Gerar, and the men of that place asked him about his wife. Now, who was Isaac's wife? You remember her name? It starts with an R? That's right. That's right. Was she a half-sister to Isaac? Say no. Okay, good idea. All right, good job. Now, was Sarah, was she a half-sister to Abraham? Yeah, okay. Different deal here, okay? This is the son. And what does he say when he gets down there? Well, she is my sister. I wonder who he learned that from. That is so strange. Why? For he was afraid to say that she is my wife, because he thought, lest the men of that place kill me for Rebekah, because she is beautiful to behold. Now, stop, pause, and just take a look at me for just a second. We read this in the pages of Scripture, and we go, oh, what a coward. And then all of a sudden, we come to the social media post, and we see these things being flashed on the screen here, and we see the map is gone. We see, throw the map up real fast for me, if you will. We see this area. Okay, there's Gaza, right? Philistines, Palestine. Okay? We see the atrocities that were just committed a week ago and all of these things, and the ladies that were being taken. And their husbands or boyfriends or whatever, they didn't appear to put up the fight. I can read this, and I can just assume that because of the fear of coming over and into this particular area, that he's just trying to cover his hide. I think that the texture, again, just by looking at the video stuff that has gone on over the course of this past week, and specifically when Hamas came into Israel and did all of that stuff, all of that imagery there, I think we can maybe have a little bit more sympathy on the guy here when he did this. And so, a lapse of faith. So we know that just like Abraham was tested, right? This is about 100 years beforehand where that Abraham had to go through that famine. So Isaac never went through any of that stuff. Again, about 100 years later. Yes, it is the son, and here it is. He's in this place. And as his faith is being tested, we understand this, that he was last seen, Genesis 25:11, at Beer Lahai Roi. Okay, so guess what? Watch this. Genesis 25, he's right there, Isaac, okay? And in the unfolding of this story, what happens? He moved his place to where? You'd have to flip back to the chapter 1, or verse number 1, right? Where did he go to? There it is. Where's that on the screen? Right there, right? Okay, so big boy Abraham, where did he come from? At one point, he was at Bethel and Ai. At another point, we got some stuff in Beersheba. Here's the point, don't miss it. Abraham leaves the farthest part and goes all the way down into Egypt. That is not what Isaac is doing. Even though he shows up with a little bit of a lie there. So, oh, that's my sister. Rebecca, this is my sister, Okay. He is moving closer to the promise. He goes from here, border, to Egypt, and he moves closer into Canaan. He moves up here to Gerar, right there. So he's moving more into the hub of where God had called him to. And what's the lesson for us? It's a very simple lesson. Watch, don't miss it. That trials either draw us closer to God or move us farther away, depending upon our response to God. That is special, gang. That is powerful. And back in verse number 2, again, we're reading this, and we like to think that it's all like, oh, this is one afternoon. No, it's not one afternoon. But back in verse number 2, we understand that God had appeared to Isaac for the first time. And in that, there was that initial response of faith. On the screen is John 14:21. It says, those who accept my commands, Jesus speaking, he says, those who accept my command and obey them are the ones who love me. And because they love me, my Father will love them. And I, watch, don't miss it, and I will love them and do what? And reveal myself to each of them. In this chapter here, at the beginning of this, we see that there's a famine. We see that Isaac is taking steps to move. One more time for the map as you get a chance there. We see that he's moving closer to the promises. He's taking a step. He's moving from down south, and he's going up higher into the land. He's doing that. And right at verse 2, God appeared to him. And you can expect, just like what we read in John 14 from Jesus saying this, you can expect that as you have obedience to the Lord and you walk things out, that you're going to see God show up for you in new ways, that you will sense his closeness in your life. And many times this becomes the struggle of faith. Again, we're not dealing with a salvation issue. I'm speaking to this room as everybody is saved, but what we are talking about is growing in the grace and knowledge of Jesus Christ. What we are talking about is that personal relationship, not salvation. I'm assuming salvation is 100% here, but I know that people go from guardrail to guardrail in the Christian faith, and we miss the aspect of fellowship with God, and we miss God doing these cool things within our life. And I can't hear the voice of God. And when I open up the Word of God, I'm so confused and overwhelmed by all of this stuff because I'm not sitting through a healthy diet of being taught the Scriptures. And so I come to the Scriptures and I'm confused. Listen, you're not going to show up and be an expert in the Word of God. You know, I've been following Jesus for 2 years. Woo! What does that mean? You may know a little bit in the New Testament. You might know where it's at in the Bible, perhaps. It doesn't mean much. That's all I'm saying. It's not a degrading thing. It's a reality thing. You know, it just takes time. And so as time went on, 26 and 7, again, we see as time moves on here, that what Isaac is doing, yeah, he got tripped up in faith, okay? He made some good steps of faith there, but he also got tripped up. And whereas his dad, again, Abraham, he made that half-truth. Isaac said, if I'm going to blow it, I'm going all the way in, okay? Rebecca is not his half-sister. She's just straight up his wife. And he just full on dives into a 100% lie right there, okay? And so I want you to understand this point, that as we live by faith, we're living without scheming. But when we start trying to lie, basically what we're trying to do is escape or soften human responsibility. And he was afraid for his life in this process. He was afraid that there could be something there. Yeah, he took steps of faith. Yeah, he was moving down south. He was getting closer. God had showed up. God had appeared to him. That was pretty powerful. That's amazing. I don't know the details of all that. It just says that God appeared to him. But that seems like that would be a huge faith builder, if that happens. And yet, we see the frailty of humanity. The same thing that you and I go through is that we have these great times with the Lord, and yet the weakness of our human flesh is still there. And as we learn how to live by faith, we are learning how to live by not scheming. We are trying to learn how to live without getting into this place of manipulating and lying, because we're trying to either escape or soften our human responsibility. Proverbs 29, it tells us this, that fearing people is a dangerous trap, but trusting the Lord means safety. The fear of man. We're not to have the fear of man. The application is that God has given us not a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. And if I want to quench the blessing, the promise, the strength that God has given, if I want to step away from that, then I begin to fall under the fear of man. I'm afraid to level up with people. I'm afraid, well, what are they going to think? What are they going to say? Be it a spouse, be it a boss, be it a family member, be it me screwing up in my life, whatever. We're not to fall under the fear of man, period, even when we blow it. And so I want to encourage you, a very practical thing, I want to encourage you to stay away from the half-truths. Why? Why do I want to encourage you to stay away from the half-truths? Because it is the half-truths that has done the damage. It breaks trust, it ruins friendships, and it hurts innocent people. Half-truths. Well, technically Sarah was kind of like, his half-sister. Yeah, it was a half-truth, I understand. And unfortunately, I've seen too much in the church where years of friendship is just tossed to the curb in an instant because of a lie. And gang, we want to stay away from that.
That's all for today. Join us for our next broadcast of No Greater Love with Pastor Jeff Kramer, weekdays at 10:30 a.m. No Greater Love is an outreach ministry of Westminster Calvary and is supported by listeners like you. If you would like to partner with us, please text any dollar amount to 84321. We would like to personally invite you to join us for our weekly worship services Sundays at 8 or 10 a.m., and Wednesdays at 6:30 p.m. We are located in Westminster, Colorado, on the northeast corner of Church Ranch and Wadsworth Parkway, near the Vasa Fitness. If you're not local, tune into the weekly live stream on our web campus, app, Roku, or on Apple TV. Have you downloaded the free Westminster Calvary app yet? You can stay up to date on coming events, join a small group, request prayer, and watch live worship services. Just search Westminster Calvary on your favorite app store today. Lastly, we're a church that's ready to serve you. If we can do so, give us a call at 303-223-4640. And remember, there's no greater love than when Jesus gave up his life for you and me. Thanks and God bless.